Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The scent of grilled meat and rosemary drifted through the warm evening air, wrapping around the garden like a memory I didn't want to touch. My mother stood at the head of the table, spatula in hand, her pearls gleaming against her tanned skin. To anyone else, we looked like the perfect family, laughter, sunlight, the sound of clinking glasses. But beneath the laughter lived something rotten. I'd known it all my life. My brothers were the center of attention as always. Marley bragged about his new office downtown. Adrian flexed his tanned arms, recounting last week's tournament victory. I passed them plates, the quiet helper as always. No one asked how my week was. No one ever did. Mom flipped a steak, then turned to me with that sharp smile, the kind that pretended to be warmth. "You know, Haley," she said, voice dripping with mock sweetness, "I sometimes wish you'd been born dead. It would have saved you so much disappointment." The laughter came instantly. My father chuckled under his breath. Marley covered his mouth to hide his grin. Adrian nearly choked on his beer. I froze. For a moment the world blurred, the crackle of fire, the chirp of cicadas, even the sunset dimmed. My chest burned, but I smiled, because that's what I'd always done. Smile, pretend, endure. "Well," I said softly, setting my fork down with care, "the feeling's mutual. The only difference is, Mom, I can make your wish come true." The laughter stopped. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mom blinked, confusion flickering behind her painted lashes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I whispered, meeting her eyes, "you'll get exactly what you asked for." Silence spread across the table like spilled wine. No one spoke. Marley looked uneasy. Adrian's grin faded. My father stared at his plate. I stood, brushing invisible crumbs from my dress. "Enjoy dinner. It's the last time you'll see me at this table." As I walked through the garden, the smell of smoke followed me, thick, suffocating, final. Behind me, my mother's voice rose faintly. "Haley, don't be dramatic." But I didn't turn around. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't swallow the hurt. I carried it with me like a torch, burning away every trace of who I used to be. That night, as the stars blinked awake, I whispered to the darkness, "Never again." And somewhere deep inside, something that had been dying for years finally came alive. After that night in the garden, silence followed me like smoke. I packed my plate away, washed it alone, and listened to their laughter fade as if I'd already vanished. The next morning, no one mentioned my mother's words. To them, it had been another joke. But to me, it was a sentence. I tried to stay invisible as always. My brothers, Marley and Adrian, joked and argued at breakfast, while Mom poured coffee into Dad's mug and ignored my empty cup. "You're quiet again, Haley," Dad said without looking up. "You should smile more. No one likes a gloomy girl." "I'll try," I whispered, though no one was listening. At work, I lingered by the window, my reflection faint against the glass. I wondered how I'd lived 30 years as a ghost in my own family. Every achievement, every A+, every promotion, had dissolved under their laughter. I was always the punchline, never the pride. That evening, Marley sent me a photo of the barbecue, captioned, "Lighten up, sis. You looked like you were attending your own funeral." He didn't realize how close he was to the truth. I stared at my phone until my vision blurred, then deleted every message, every number. It wasn't rage that guided me, it was the quiet certainty that I'd had enough. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "If I've been invisible all this time, maybe disappearing won't be that hard." The reflection didn't answer, but for the first time, it didn't look like a ghost. I don't know why I agreed to come back for dinner. Maybe habit, maybe the last spark of hope that my family could change. After all, my mother called during the day and asked me to come to dinner, which she was organizing as a sign of reconciliation. The smell of barbecue and laughter hit me before I even stepped through the gate. Mom greeted me with her usual thin smile. "You look tired, Haley, working too much?" "Just enough," I said, forcing calm. Marley and Adrian were already deep in stories about their achievements. They spoke like performers on a stage, while I sat quietly, invisible in the front row. Then Mom said, "Remember when Haley tried to run that little bake sale? Burned half the cookies." Everyone laughed. I smiled weakly, but the sound of their laughter, the same cruel sound that had followed me all my life, pressed down on me until I couldn't breathe. "Do you ever realize," I said slowly, my voice shaking, "that every funny story about me is just another way to humiliate me?" Marley frowned. "Oh, come on, it's just family humor." "No," I said, standing up. "It's cruelty dressed as love." Silence. Forks froze midair. Mom's face hardened. "Sit down, Haley. Don't ruin dinner again." "I'm not ruining anything," I whispered. "I'm leaving what's already ruined." I set my napkin down gently, my heart steady for the first time in years. "You can keep laughing. I'm done being your joke." As I walked away, no one called my name. The night air felt cold but honest, like truth finally taking its first breath. I left before sunrise. The house behind me was dark, every window blank like the eyes of people who had never really seen me. I didn't leave a note, only silence. Silence had always been the language they taught me best. I drove until the roads turned unfamiliar. Somewhere between exhaustion and relief, I stopped at a gas station and cried in the car until the sun came up. It wasn't grief, it was release. By the end of the week, I was in San Francisco, renting a tiny apartment that smelled of dust and freedom. It had one window overlooking the bay, and every morning, the light touched my face like forgiveness. I found work as a pastry assistant, then baker. My hands, once trembling from holding back tears, now kneaded dough and created beauty that didn't need approval. One evening, Marley texted, "Mom says you've made your point. Come home." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "I already am home." Then I turned off my phone. Sometimes guilt tried to visit me at night, whispering that I'd abandoned them. But I'd remind myself, I hadn't abandoned love. I'd simply stopped chasing people who never offered it. For the first time, I could taste sweetness without pain. 5 years later, peace didn't feel foreign. It felt earned. I married Peter, a gentle man who listened when I spoke and loved without competition. Together, we built a home filled with laughter that healed, not wounded. Our daughters, Ava and Layla, grew up equally loved by us. They knew that invisible people don't exist and that they could rely on Peter and me at any moment in their lives. One afternoon, as we baked cookies, Ava asked, "Mommy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa visit?" I smiled softly, because sometimes love means staying away from what hurts you. That night, I received an email from Marley, "Mom's sick, she wants to see you." I read it once, twice, then deleted it. Peter noticed my stillness. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I said, closing the laptop. "It's finally all right." Outside, the stars were gentle. The air smelled like sugar and sea salt. I thought about that night years ago, the fire in my mother's eyes, her cruel words, and the quiet promise I made. She wished I'd been born dead. I granted that wish, but only to the version of me that needed her approval. The woman who lived now was finally alive.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.